China has been getting a lot of extra attention in recent weeks, and this week was no exception. Several congressional committees held hearings on China, including the Select Committee on the Strategic Competition between the U.S. and the CCP. They held their inaugural hearing Tuesday night in prime time. The focus was on the Chinese Communist Party's threat to America, something that, frankly, both Republicans and Democrats agree on, but how they address it, well, not so much agreement there. Now, the House Foreign Affairs Committee also held a hearing on combating the generational challenge of CCP aggression. Is momentum building here in Washington to address what many have and are now coming to recognize as America's greatest external threat? Joining me now to discuss this and more is Congressman Chris Smith, who is on the House Committee on Foreign Affairs. He's also the co-chairman of the Tom Lantos Human Rights Commission. And, as I mentioned earlier, he is the chairman of the Congressional Executive Commission on China. He represents the 4th Congressional District of New Jersey. Congressman Smith, welcome back to the program.
Thank you very much, Tony. Thanks for having me.
Well, first off, let me congratulate you on being a recipient of FRC's True Blue Award, which honors members of Congress for defending faith, family, and freedom. And you have been doing that for many, many years.
Tony, thank you so very much for the award and for my colleagues that you have also lifted up and encouraged with the award. And thank you for your leadership, which is extraordinary.
Well, thank you, Chris. And
it really is.
You are one of the 2 most senior members in the House of Representatives. You've been here since 1981. And I want to ask you this question because I think sometimes institutional history is important. Has the level of attention that China is getting these days, has this increased? Are we now seeing people come to a realization that China is a problem?
I think at long last, that realization has come to the fore. Under Xi Jinping, the dictator, he has demonstrated monstrous policies, a genocide against the Muslims, the crushing of the underground Christian church and all other churches. And what he has done on virtually every single human rights category, from his pervasive use of torture, which is if you're arrested and you're a political or religious prisoner, you will be tortured until you sign a confession and give up other people who might be co-religionists. It's that bad. And of course, what he did in Hong Kong when he took over Hong Kong, despite solemn promises and treaty obligations not to do what they've done, that is to eviscerate human rights in Hong Kong. And now he has his eye on Taiwan. So there's no other place on the face of the earth where there's a massive genocide taking place in a country that's not at war. It's at war with its own people, but it's not at war in terms of other nations. So it's really a serious, serious problem. And I think people realize that his military, which is bristling with capability, courtesy of the United States taxpayer and our big woke corporations that have conveyed that capability to them in all kinds of areas. And I could go into it if you'd like, but all these dual use items that they've gotten for years under the false sense that if you trade more with China, they will matriculate from a gross dictatorship to a democracy. That hasn't happened in history. It's not happening now. And we're seeing other human rights abuses finally getting exposed, like the whole issue of organ harvesting that is coercive.
Yeah, I'm going to talk about that coming up because you had a bill that made its way through this week in the House. I want to go back to something for a moment because you've been sounding the alarm on China for a long time. You know, long before balloons were floating across the country and getting people's attention of their intentions to spy on us. But many of your colleagues, as you said, have come to a realization that China is a threat. In fact, during the Select Committee's hearing this week, former U.S. National Security Advisor H.R. McMaster said China poses a greater threat to American interests than did the Soviet Union. And I think we both agree with that. But I want to ask you, as the awareness is growing of the threat of China, are you seeing China intensify their human rights abuses and their reach beyond their own borders to take their totalitarian tactics abroad?
Yes, on all of that. Bill Clinton delinked human rights from trade on May 26, 1994. And that is when we lost China. All of these corporate types And of course, people who kowtow to the Chinese dictatorship, especially in Congress and especially Bill Clinton, were doing everything they could to appease one dictatorship leader after another in China. And when we finally got to we had Hu Jintao and all these others, I'll never forget President Obama, when Hu Jintao was at the White House, they had a press conference. Great question came from the press about human rights abuse. And he said, well, they have a different culture and a different type of government. Yeah, they have a dictatorship, and how dare you insult the culture of the Chinese people as if they don't understand fundamental human rights. Look at what Tiananmen Square was all about, as all those young people rallied, and then so many were killed in order to try to procure basic fundamental human rights for themselves.
Yeah,
so it's getting worse every single day.
That's a very important point to make, just like what we've seen unfolding in recent months in Iran, is that it is the government, it is the Communist Party of China that's the problem,
Yes.
not the Chinese people. The Chinese people are yearning to be free. They're trying to throw off this repressive regime, but the totalitarian tactics are so repressive, it is quite difficult. Now, another comment that H.R. McMaster's said during the committee hearing was that he said a preemptive attack on American soil was possible in the event of U.S.-China conflict over Taiwan. I can't think of anyone who is a better expert on China in Congress than you. Do you think that's possible, given what you know about the CCP?
I think it's possible. I think the chaos that is occurring in China today, and what is Xi Jinping, how is he responding? And some of it, nobody ever talks about this, is the horrible consequences of the one child per couple policy, which has led to a huge disparity between males and females. There's about 60 million plus missing girls, some of whom would be women of various ages, because of the one child per couple forced abortion policy. I had hearings throughout the 80s and 90s and 2000 and beyond on what that would do in terms of a militaristic point of view. Not only does it destroy babies and their mothers, but it would also lead to Xi Jinping or whoever the dictator might be at the time to try to project outward and stoke the fires of nationalism. And that's exactly what he is doing. He has threatened, obviously, he has threatened Japan repeatedly. He has threatened us. And he's got nuclear capability, weapons that, again, they either stole from us or the technology for missiles and the like that we sold them. And that started under the Clinton administration. You know, remember that famous saying by Lenin, we'll hang the West and they'll sell us the rope? Wrong country. Wasn't the Soviet Union. It's China. We have sold them the rope that they can put around our neck and around our allies' neck. And again, the concern for human life by Xi Jinping and the Chinese Communist Party is non-existent. It's all throwaway. They couldn't care less about their own people, and even more so, couldn't care less about us. That's why fentanyl is flooding our markets right now, because that's one way of getting back at the Americans and bringing it up through the Mexican cartels. It's all coming from China originally, and it's killing 100,000 odd people each and every year. Nothing from the Biden administration of Murat to try to stop that.
I would only correct one thing you said, Chris, and that is not only have we sold them the rope that they're using, but we have actually given them the money to buy the rope that we're selling them. It's absolutely insane how we are treating China when they have made very clear what their intentions are. Now, as we were going out, I said you were addressing the issue of organ harvesting by the CCP, and Congress may as well. The reason I said it that way is that unlike many measures simply having Republican support, your bill addressing this issue has bipartisan support.
Yeah, we worked very hard to try to achieve that. Congressman Bill Keating is the principal Democrat co-sponsor. Kathy Manning is on it as well. French Hill, of course, on the Republican side. And the chairman of the full committee, Michael McCall, is also an original co-sponsor. I introduced this bill last Congress. It went nowhere. I tried very hard to get it marked up. But thankfully this year, it's on a fast track, and I think that's in part because a growing understanding, as you indicated in the earlier segment, of what is happening and people's understanding of the Chinese dictatorship under the Communist Party there. And of course, our leadership, Kevin McCarthy, right on down, have made combating China's malign influence and its threat, and it is an existential threat, a very serious priority for this Congress.
So let's talk about this organ harvesting. I know the title,
Sure.
the title is Stop Forced Organ Harvesting Act of 2023, but two questions for you. What is that, just so our listeners and viewers are very clear on what we're talking about here, and how big of a problem is it?
What it is by definition, it's the coercive taking of a person's inner organs, including liver, heart, lung, whatever it might be, against their will, and almost always resulting in the death of that person. In the Chinese Communist parties in China that they run, there's about 100,000. Low-end estimate is 60,000 to 100,000 victims every year who are killed to get their vital organs. It's a huge money maker for the Chinese Communist Party. It is also for any high official or any official really in the party that is in need of a transplant. They go to the oppressed peoples of China, including the Falun Gong, the Uyghurs, that would be the Muslims, Christians, and others. They round them up, bring them in. The secret police brings them into. They do it with prisoners that are already incarcerated as well for political and religious reasons, and then they kill them. I had one doctor at my hearing several months ago who actually did one of those, and he explained that the man wasn't even dead. He was in shock and began moving. He continued the operation, the macabre operation of stealing his organs. And then we have, Nathan Gutman and so many others who have provided expert insight into how pervasive it is. Our bill applies not just to China, but to any other country in the world after a major report required by the bill, or hopefully a soon-to-be law, would look at other places as well, because it is going on in India. It's going on in places like Iran, as you know from your work as head of the Religious Freedom Commission. But by far the most egregious violator is and continues to be, again, upwards of 100,000 victims every single year. And one thing that is underappreciated as well is that there's a hospital called the 301 Hospital in Beijing, and there are other hospitals like it, where any of the Chinese Communist Party leadership in need of a transplant will go, and they'll bring in a victim and steal their organs to keep that person alive and to make the transplant. They're very good at doing it, but they kill every single victim while they're doing it. So it's a barbaric practice. It's reminiscent of the medicine practiced by the Nazis, and Xi Jinping is directly responsible for making this even worse during his reign of terror, the dictator of China. So our bill would also ensure that any country, but China, again, the worst example, is sanctioned, that the people who are involved with this supply chain are barred entry into the United States, made inadmissible, can't get a visa. And also they can do no business here whatsoever. No matter what they want to buy or sell, can't do it here. And
this is a big industry. I mean, this is a $1 billion industry where people are traveling there for tourism to get organs. You talked about the Uyghurs. They're attracting people from Muslim countries because of the dietary restrictions of the Uyghurs. I mean, this is not speculation. We've got
not.
Independent agencies that have validated these claims.
Exactly right. And the reason why we wanted the State Department to do a massive study is to put their imprimatur on the facts, and the facts are there. And hopefully through our intel community, they can even ferret out even more as to what's going on. It's hiding in plain sight, but it's a egregious practice that almost nobody really knows much about.
Right.
I don't see the media talking about. You do,
No. Yeah,
but I don't see others talking about it.
I in 4 years, I never did a single interview on this with the mainstream media on any of the. In fact, very few with the mainstream media on any of the repressive tactics of China, other countries when it came to religious freedom and human rights like this. We're almost out of time, Chris, but this issue, is this something that you think you can get support for in the Senate to get it through and
Yes.
on to President Biden?
I do, and I think there will be, we will pass it in the House, and I do believe, Senator Tom Cotton, who is a great friend and a true champion for human rights, he's the sponsor on the Senate side, and so we're working in tandem to get this to the president's desk. We did reach out to the State Department, and there were individual State Department personnel who were helpful, and we didn't have the stop sign like we so often get when it comes to human rights issues. So hopefully that means when it gets to the president, he will sign it. If he doesn't sign it, I will predict we will override that veto.
Wow. Well, and also we're slap out of time, but I do want to make a point you said earlier about American corporations. Knowing what we know about the Communist Party in China, no legitimate business, no American company should be taking advantage of cheap labor, because oftentimes those very individuals who are being used for cheap labor, they're also some of those that are being used for the organ transplants. They're stealing their organs. This is horrific. Chris, always great to see you. Thank you for your leadership.
Thank you very much.
Have a great weekend.